Hello, everyone. You've tuned in to the Indiana State Police Roadshow, brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance and Cops for Kids, subsidiary of the Indiana State Police Alliance. I want to thank them for their continued support of the Indiana State Police Roadshow. Thank you very much for your support, and we want to thank Tom Trial, our man behind the scene. Tom, Happy New Year, Tom. Tom's waving in the Happy New Year style to us behind the scenes. Thanks for putting us on YouTube. You can watch all of our ISP Roadshows on the Indiana State Police YouTube site, and there's a lot of past shows and past tapes that Tom has found out through our back years that he's put on there. So a lot of interesting things to see on the ISP YouTube site. Go and take a look and see what you see. I want to welcome my guest here today, Sergeant Chris Lambert. Welcome, Chris.
Well, thank you.
Thanks for being out here today with us and coming out on this rather chilly day here with us, but at least you're not in the water.
Exactly.
Chris Lambert's in charge of the Indiana State Police scuba team for our department, and you guys have been kind of busy here lately. We were talking before we went on the air, before this real cold snap hit. You guys were doing a lot of operational dives, weren't you?
Yes, we were. We had, I think, right before Christmas, about 7 in a row. So the last 2 weeks before Christmas, we're pretty busy.
Does that kind of seem like that was when I was in the bomb squad? You'd go for a long time with maybe nothing, and then boom, 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 you were doing everything, and then...
For us, typically throughout the year, it's relatively consistent. I mean, regardless of whether it's warm weather or cold weather, we still have evidence to look for. Cases that are still pending and still develop. Sadly, in the wintertime, a lot of ice fishermen and drownings, people falling through the ice. So we're consistent throughout the year. Is
there ever a temperature where you can't dive, or is that? I mean, because of like air, your air quit or whatever.
No, the equipment that we have. In particular, the surface applied air system that we have, that is a cold water system. So unless the surface temperature is below, I think, about 40 degrees Fahrenheit, we can still dive. The water temperature is anywhere under the ice is anywhere between 34 and 36 degrees, so above freezing. So it actually keeps our equipment from freezing. So once we enter the water, as long as everything's good on the surface, we're fine. Okay, good. Well, good to hear that. And I hope you don't have to. Here's to not having to get in the water this time of year, man. Exactly.
That's terrible. But that's one of the things we brought you in here today to talk about, because we've had some incidents around Indiana where I know some people have gotten in trouble in the ice, and it's a real issue when people get out there when it's not safe. So what is that term? What is safe ice?
A lot of people say there's no such thing as safe ice. It's kind of hard to give a definitive answer to when ice is safe. For the layperson, you can't look at ice based on its age, its physical appearance, like the air temperature, and how thick it is. There's so many other factors that come into play, like the depth of the water underneath the ice, whether there's currents or water chemistry. So I guess ice can be relatively safe if you actually check it, do a physical check of the ice, and know your body of water that you're going to be using for whatever activities that you're going to be participating in.
Would snow on the ice make a difference also, or the lack of snow either way?
Either way it does. Snow acts as an insulator, just like a blanket. So early ice, when in December, when we had the first really cold stretch and the lakes began to freeze, then we had snow that was on top of that. Snow will actually slow down that buildup of ice. Also in the late season, in the early spring, when we still have ice on the bodies of water, that snow will act as a blanket. So when the air temperature is above freezing, it'll actually maintain that ice for a little bit longer than it normally would if there's no snow on top of it. So yeah, snow definitely affects the freezing and the thawing of ice.
That's interesting. So does it ever start melting under there and you wouldn't realize it possibly?
Oh, absolutely. In particular with snow, when the air temperature is above freezing, that snow will start to melt and that water will percolate down through the ice and will actually start to degrade the ice. You can see the ice honeycomb.
Okay.
When it honeycombs, the cloudiness in the ice is actually air. Well, that reduces the strength sometimes in excess of half the strength of the ice. So you can have 4 inches of clear, solid ice that would support one person, maybe 2, ice fishing, and have 4 inches of bad ice that won't even support one person, or rotten ice that has it's been honeycombed and percolated with, or the water's percolated through it and made it weak.
Can you have different areas of thickness of ice on the same body of water?
Yes, you can. Ice can vary in thickness just within a matter of feet. There's a lot of factors that come into play. If you look on most of the retention ponds, you'll typically see waterfowl out towards the center. Well, there's always that open area of water. The waterfowl keep the water moving, and since the water temperature is above freezing, they keep the ice from forming. There are a lot of aerators and fountains that will keep the warmer water that's on the bottom actually brought up to the surface and keep the ice from forming evenly. But there's other factors that you can't see, whether it's rotting vegetation. Just the fact that the vegetation rots, it gives off heat. That warm water will, what we call, upwell under the bottom of the ice and start to deteriorate the ice. You can have currents, moving water against that ice will keep that ice from forming. You may have a standpipe or a drain pipe in a retention pond that's taking wastewater off of the road.
Right.
Well, now you've also, besides had warm water, now you've got changes in water chemistry, which is salt water, which we all know salt water freezes at a lower temperature than fresh water. So there are so many things that can affect that, and we've seen it even in the retention pond in front of the Indianapolis Post, where we can have 8 inches of ice 15, 20 feet from shore and walk towards one of those aerators, and within a matter of yards, we're in ice that won't even support one of our divers, preparing for some training. So, yeah.
And I guess people could probably relate that to, they tell you to leave a pencil lead size of water running in your house.
Exactly.
Keep it from freezing. So that's same thing. If you have running water there with your aerator, it's not going to freeze.
Right. Anytime that there's a body of water that is definitely moving, that is moving water, stay away from it. Stay away from it.
So what are some general guidelines on thicknesses of ice? If you want to look at something and you think, maybe I want to do some ice fishing on there, what are you looking at?
Well, we tell people that anytime that there is less than 4 inches of ice, stay off of the water. Clear ice that is at least 4 inches thick can support one person for activities such as ice fishing. We don't like to see small groups, 2 or 3 people out on the ice until it's about 6 inches. Okay. Most people in the northern states, they'll ride snowmobiles and ATVs on the ice between 5 and 7 inches. Small cars, light pickup trucks, about 8 inches to a foot thick. And if you want to get a medium-duty pickup truck, say pulling a trailer or an ice shanty, again, a lot of northern states, at least a foot, preferably 15 inches. Now, that's clear ice. Yeah. That is newly formed ice that is, just like I said, it's clear. It looks like a commercially manufactured ice cube.
Okay.
You don't see any air pockets. It's not snowy or cloudy looking. And that will typically, a rule of thumb is you have to have at least a week where the air temperature is below freezing for there to be enough ice to support one person.
Is that below freezing 24/7?
There's a formula for that, but they call it the average temperature, and it's freezing degree days. It's really complicated, but the rule of thumb is you want the highest temperature of the day, regardless, to be below freezing for 24 hours, and then have that for 7 successive days to get 4 inches of ice.
So what's a good way for people to check that thickness?
There's several ways. Number one, if they call a local bait shop, most of the guys that come in there to do, our people that come in there to do the ice fishing, they will know the thicknesses of the ice at the popular locations.
Right.
Any lakeside resort, maybe down in Monroe, where they have some kind of resort activity all year round, they might know the thickness of the ice. If you get out there, you can always check it yourself. There's several ways that you can do that. If you have access to an ice chisel, you can chisel your way through the ice, make a hole big enough for a tape measure, stick a tape measure through and check it. Also, an ice auger is nice, whether it's hand-powered or electrically powered ice auger. You could even use something as simple as a cordless drill. If you have like a wood bit, one of the fluted wood bits that's wide enough to accommodate a tape measure size hole, and stick a tape measure down in there and see what the thickness of the ice is. The nice thing about the auger, and one of the reasons why we use an auger to gauge that ice, is we can actually see what that ice looks like to make sure that it is clear ice and it's not the cloudy, frosted, weak ice or rotten ice.
See that on the side as you auger down.
Yes, you can.
Well, again, you're listening to the Indiana State Police Roadshow. I'm speaking with Sergeant Chris Lambert for the Indiana State Police Scuba Team. We're talking about ice safety. So you check the ice, everything looks good, but unfortunately you fall through. What's a person need to remember?
Well, the first thing, you need to have a survival plan ahead of time. What we always tell people is anytime you're on the water for any water-based activity, we want you to have a life jacket or personal flotation device. If you're going to be on the ice, wear a foam PFD underneath your heavy winter clothing, besides another layer of warmth. If you fall into the water, it's going to support the extra weight of that clothing. But if you fall in, the first thing, which is easier said than done, is try not to panic.
Right, yeah.
Don't remove your winter clothing. Hopefully you've got that PFD on underneath. That winter clothing may actually trap a pocket of air and act as its own flotation for a very short time. We want people to turn towards the direction that they came from. That's probably going to be the thickest ice, or at least ice that's thick enough to support your weight. If you can call for help, definitely start calling for help. But once you've turned towards the direction that you came, put your elbows or your arms up on top of the ice. If you've planned ahead and you have ice picks or ice awls that are commercially available, use those ice picks and those awls to start pulling yourself up onto that ice shelf. Kick your feet just like you're swimming, and pull yourself up on top of the ice. If your clothing is soaked with water, you might have to do it in stages to let that water drain out.
Okay.
But kick and pull yourself up onto that ice. Once you're completely on top of the ice, roll away from the hole. Don't stand up. You want your weight distributed across a larger surface area.
Okay.
So roll towards the direction that you came. Once you feel that you can get up to your knees, you may crawl or eventually walk up to the shore. And then you have to treat yourself for hypothermia. Get rid of your wet clothes if you can. Go inside, seek shelter, and get warm and dry as soon as possible.
What if you're out there with somebody else and they fall through?
The first thing you need to do is call 911. Chances are you're going to have a cell phone. If not, somebody within earshot may have a cell phone. So call 911 and get help. The same principles that affect somebody that's falling through the ice is just the same as somebody that's drowning. We teach preach, reach, preach, reach, throw, row, don't go. The first thing we want you to do is talk them into self-survival. Give them the steps that I just mentioned, and you turn and face the ice. Use your elbows to get up on top of the ice shelf, kick your feet. Tell them that help is on the way. Just that voice is reassuring and calm, and it might prevent them from going into panic. You want to break that panic cycle. Reach for them. Anything that you can think of, whether it's a tree branch, it might be a ladder, anything that's in your immediate environment that you can use to reach out and extend your the length of your arm. But keep in mind, if they start to pull you in, you've got to let go. You can't be a secondary victim.
Right.
And it's very difficult sometimes too, but you have to fight that urge to run towards the hole to help that person.
Yeah.
So if the reaching is not effective, then throw them anything that can float. An old bench seat in the back of one of our old Crown Vic police cars.
Right. Yeah.
We always told the troopers in recruit school that is an excellent flotation device. The headrest from a car is a foam-filled container.
Right.
You could use that. A spare tire. 1 gallon, an empty gallon milk jug is about 8 pounds of positive buoyancy. So just giving them an empty jug to hold on to could be enough to support their head and keep their airway open. But throw, if you have access to a small boat, which a lot of retention ponds around Indiana, people will just turn their boat over in the summer and leave it tied to a tree. You have that you can use to get out into the water. But the final thing is definitely don't go. If you are even a trained rescuer, it's very difficult for us to affect those rescues sometimes. But we do not want you to be a secondary victim. So don't go.
Well, that's a lot of good information that we've went through here very quickly, and we probably just touched on the very point of it. But I think the main thing, like you said, you wanted is don't go make yourself a secondary victim, and check that out thoroughly before you go out on any ice activities that you're going to do out there.
Exactly. Have a plan.
Yeah, have a plan for survival. Well, Chris, thanks for coming in today. I appreciate you being here. I hope we don't hear that you're out on doing any ice dives, and pray that everybody stays safe this winter. Well, again, you're listening to the Indiana State Police Roadshow, brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance. Make sure that you heed these warnings on these ice survival plans and have a plan in case something bad does happen. The Indiana State Police Roadshow is brought to you by the Indiana State Police Alliance. Cops for Kids, a subsidiary of the Indiana State Police Alliance. Thank you for their continued support. Thank you, Tom, for putting us on the air. We'll talk to you again next week on The Roadshow. The Roadshow is out.